Unfortunately, the terms and conditions of entering the drinking afterwards include coming into this room to start with, so...
Yeah.
Dash terms and conditions.
The T's and C's.
Currently in New Zealand society, we equally fund different university degrees despite the fact that they have vastly different contributions to society at the end of the road in university. On the side of the house, we think that that's an untenable situation, we think that that's inefficient, we think that that promotes the wrong ideals in our society, and we say that an extreme example of this is the current continued funding of the arts degree, which makes it one of the cheapest degrees that you can take at university, which makes it very easy to take and a very attractive option for people to take, despite the fact that we think that it has a much lesser value and actually doesn't require, in many cases, actually taking a degree in that subject to learn it. Ladies and gentlemen, we say that on this side of the house we would abolish all funding of arts degrees. We say that there are some subjects on the borderline. We think that economics and psychology are both sciences. They can be incorporated into other forms of the university. We say that if somebody wants to be an English teacher, that can be incorporated into a teaching degree where they have to become a teacher at the end of that road if they want to do English at university. We say that we have basically three main points in this. Firstly, we say that arts don't actually require university degrees to be promoted in society. We say secondly that arts degrees as on a whole just don't have the value to society that other degrees have and don't deserve this funding and don't have enough value to society to get government funding. We say thirdly that actually, especially in New Zealand, we're lacking people getting degrees in other subjects. We think that too many people are taking arts degrees. We want to promote the idea of people taking other degrees instead. Firstly, why arts don't actually need university. First of all, we say that no one is going to stop writing great books or creating great art or making great music if we don't have arts degrees at university. We don't think there's going to be any obstruction to any of these things whatsoever. In fact, it could easily be promoted because it's in fact other degrees that allow people to get the life experience to be able to write books. There are lots of great lawyers and doctors that write really, really good books as well. We say that artists usually often don't go to university because they go to art school instead. We say that musicians are in the same boat there. We don't think that we're going to see a reduced amount of art in society, and if we really want to see more art in society, then we can fund that instead of funding degrees. Secondly, we say that it's actually really easy to self-educate in subjects that are often arts degrees, because basically what you do if you're an art student, you read books and you write about those things. We say it's really, really easy to read books outside of university if you're doing something else. We don't think people need to do degrees in them to learn about them. So the real meat of this debate, however, is going to come down to the value in society of these things. We say that currently in a societal context, we see that if you take a commerce degree like accounting, if you take a science degree, if you take a law degree, if you take a medicine degree, these things all have clear jobs when you leave university. These things all have a clear value to society when you leave university. If you take an English or a philosophy degree, you do a master's, you do a PhD degree, and you try and become a lecturer in that subject. We think that all that is a kind of self-replicating process that doesn't actually contribute to any value at the end of the day to society, whereas you put stark contrast in these things. The regular reason why we fund university degrees is because we see that educated people are going to make a contribution to society by first of all, the very fact that they're educated, and secondly, the fact that when they get out of that, they're going to earn more money and contribute more to society for that reason. One, people are still going to be able to be educated because they're still going to be able to do degrees at all. Two, we say that, as I've already espoused, regular degrees, regular arts degrees, you don't actually end up getting a very job except in extremely limited circumstances. We say that actually something like science in particular has a much larger value than arts. We say that and this is really going to segue into my third point quite nicely, where I say that actually we want to encourage people to stop taking arts degrees. Because as it currently stands, people are really, really keen on doing arts degrees. Why? Because they're cheap, because they're fast, and because people perceive them as being really easy. We say that we don't like promoting that thing, that kind of view of arts degrees. That's a bad thing. Because what does it do? It reduces the number of people that take, I'm going to use as my chief example here, science degrees. Why are science degrees really, really awesome? Because the scientific thinking and scientific thought actually promote the great contribution to society. In fact, all of the things that we analyse when it comes to politics degrees and so on can often actually be cured better by using science degrees. As a chief example of this, politicians love to sit there and say what's going to make people really, really happy and educate them better and should the government do this or that. One, if you invent the internet, that solves all education problems, for example, in terms of discussions that you have in politics. Secondly, we say that if you invent medicine, you're actually going to improve people's, improve medicine and improve scientific things. You're going to improve people's lives a hell of a lot more than if the government does anything whatsoever. We say that actually, that means that there's much greater value to people contributing scientific research and people doing things in science than any kind of study in something like politics. We say that actually we want to promote that idea that science is actually a much greater value to society because it's created this wonderful world we live in where we can individually have really cheap video cameras to film our debates, in which we can have an entire wireless system in the university that allows us to exchange information at an extremely fast rate. We think that that's awesome, and we think that science makes that contribution. We think there's actually a deficit of people choosing to study certain scientific courses in New Zealand at the moment. We think that that's an appalling thing, and that it'd be a greater thing if people chose to study those things instead. Equally, it could be said to do with certain high-level commerce degrees like finance and honours economics and things like that. That ability to study those things is going to contribute more greatly to our society. We say that the market shows that because people get more jobs. But currently we interfere with the market by funding arts degrees just as much, which is shit because that interferes with the market. It doesn't represent societal value. We say that that's a terrible thing. We say that if Paul's going to stand up here and be like, the market's great, well, we're screwing with the market by funding arts degrees equally to science degrees when even the government can see that they're not of the same value. We say that that's an appalling thing. We say that, like, if you look at a degree that's not an arts degree, you're going to get more value out of that person in society because when they graduate, they can go and work for a business and contribute really well to that business in a way that someone with an arts degree cannot. We say that for these reasons, we absolutely stand up for abolishing funding arts degrees.
It's a guide to fees. Guide to fees. Oh yeah, first. Yeah, got it. First Nick.
I was on the phone to ASB about insurance a couple of weeks ago, and I made some corny joke about being one step ahead, but then she reminded me that actually that's not our phrase anymore, it's creating futures. I felt it a bit, so.
Your banking knowledge is just a little bit lower.
Clearly not one.
You're not going to get a job there after you graduate, are you?
Well, probably not now, no.
What's the insurance like?
At least especially on the
They probably
insurance
logged it. Purdon does not know us.
I personally been told that getting
passionate
jobs
about
at the BNZ is really easy, and it's great if you are good at selling things like selling cherries. The bank would probably give you a job.
But
That did be disturbing.
BNZ like sells shit things like
No, if you're
Our cherries on a Wednesday,
you
good
can
though.
get
cherries not brilliant either.
you can
Right,
get
good, we've got a-
insurance with the Medical Assurance Society.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to look at 3 key ideas for you today. First of all, just going to really quickly discuss the affirmative's notion of we're messing with the market, we're putting money into things that don't make really clear and distinguishable jobs and that are kind of a bit harder to see the core skills that are coming out, so that's really, really bad. I'm then going to look at the social good that we see that accumulate in arts degrees and why therefore we're really, really happy to be able to make them cheap, to be able to get large amounts of the population accruing these benefits at a relatively quick rate, why we think that that has huge benefits enough to justify the government funding. And then thirdly, I'm going to look at the really hard and fast benefits that we get out of art degrees, the parts of the jobs that are created and things, but that the market doesn't necessarily incentivise as well as it does like doctors or engineers or like scientists have the really clear jobs to go into, like the affirmative team have been talking about. So first of all, just really quickly with this issue that they have about we're messing with the market. They say that, well, like doctors and lawyers and stuff, they're in lots of demand, and scientists are in lots of demands. And apparently like economists and other arts people who are actually secretly scientists. So take all those degrees and we'll fund those. And people like are like teachers, they're in really high demand, so we'll pay for a teaching degree and then we'll pay for you to have an arts degree as well, but because you're teaching it's not really an arts skill, but that's sort of an aside. So they say that we're messing with the market when we're doing all these things, it's really, really bad. We say that the key idea that they've kind of missed here, and that'll mean that our other 2 points stand, is that lots of those jobs are really enticed by the market. They have, yes, like science and stuff, has a huge value. It's really, really valuable to us when doctors create medicine or when people do things like invent the internet. But those are really clear pathways that when people are going to university, they see and choose and will follow kind of regardless of how much funding there is there for that. We say that the danger is that the arts programs that are offered now offer less of those really, really clear job outcomes, but are still equally as important, and so the market doesn't quite incentivise them in the same way, and if we don't fund it, we'll lose it. So ladies and gentlemen, we like messing with the market when it means we get a much better outcome. And so my next 2 points are going to be around why we get a much better outcome by encouraging and continuing to fund arts degrees. So first of all, looking at the social good that we get out of arts degrees in terms of diversity of thought, because we see that it's actually a really important thing, that the public in general don't think just like scientists think, but also have the ability to think in different ways. We think that when you have people going and getting philosophy degrees and learning different ways of questioning things like truth and learning different ways of questioning things like religion and things like that, we think that that's really important. We think that when you have lots of students learning things like linguistic studies or different languages or things about different cultures and you enhance cultural understanding and you build bridges there, that's a really valuable thing. We think that when you have students going through university who are getting politics degrees, who are learning to question the system that their government operates on, who are learning to be good, engaged citizens, that's a really important thing. The same holds true with like media studies students, who are learning not like scientists but like art students to critically analyse the things that we're being fed. We say that these are all really, really important skills that we're happy to make cheap and easy. And ladies and gentlemen, why don't these happen outside of university to the extent that they happen inside? We say because no matter how many books you sit down and read, like if I'm Joe Bloggs out on the street, I'm not in university, and I think I want to learn something about philosophy, to get the same diversity of opinion and thought and like academic scrutiny that I would get in a classroom, I would have to read like a gazillion books and like write to other academics and be like, what do you think about my stuff? But like, who's going to do that compared to who's going to sit in a degree? We say that actually the way that ideas come together at university, like that doesn't mean that arts is only ever happens at university, but that having the degree there is of such immense value to the wide range of critical thinking that arts degrees encourage, that we absolutely can't just let it like rest on the laurels of the general public to read some books and educate themselves. We need the funding there to see those amazing things happening. And we say that further on from that we actually see a lot of really solid benefits in terms of job opportunities that are generated through arts degrees. We look at, for example, the idea of teachers. When we want, like our high school students and our primary school students, whatever, to have like a basic knowledge of a lot of art subjects, like we'd like them to be literate and we'd like them to know a bit about different languages or a bit about like geography and history and things. We say that if you want to encourage top people to be teaching our young people, you have to be encouraging them to get really good degrees in those subjects. We say that that's one example where we get jobs. But furthermore, we say that in the public sector in particular, there's huge enormity on things like research on like, for example, Indigenous studies, which is a field that is becoming like increasingly critical in understanding how to stop marginalised Indigenous communities like being marginalised. It doesn't matter if you have the internet, if you don't understand how a community works and functions and receives new technology, its uptake will be like minimal and the good won't be done. We say that that sort of like critical thinking about stuff that's a bit harder to like pin down and be like, I'm an engineer, I build bridges, like I research these fields. So that sort of critical thinking is absolutely necessary for really good administration of some of the science stuff that we see coming out, and won't happen in the general public. There's not the incentive so much for people to start reading a lot of books and to go and spend a year with a group of people, interviewing a lot of people. They need the degrees, they need the backing to get into jobs, ladies and gentlemen. We see that that's actually a really important sector of stuff that's generated, something that the government values in the end when they have the product, and so should be valuing at the start when they have the opportunity to have input into the decisions and the ability of people to study in these courses. So because of the huge benefits, both socially and sort of in terms of jobs that we get, we would absolutely continue funding arts programs.
Oh, you guys didn't. Hold on a second.
There won't be.
Flashing red.
Your tape's running out.
Yeah.
Oh no.
That's going to be really annoying putting it on the computer.
If the red's flashing,
It's going to be. I should say it's going to mildly
Yeah,
inconvenience me putting it on the computer.
Really not.
Oh,
I think the flashing's a wee bit more perfect because it's kind of like.
This was what I
See me now?
It's
No,
like
you
Does
don't.
it?
It's hard to break it down that end. Can
You're not opening. Oh, because I'm
empty,
still
so I'm gonna
recording.
go fill it up very quickly.
Nothing.
You staying there.
You stood there for a while.
Your mannerisms, your.
Oh damn.
We haven't got Purdon in the wild.
No.
We got now. No. We'll just wait for a wee bit.
Captivity.
That's what a Purdon looks like in captivity. A beautiful specimen.
That comment deserved a smile.
I'm glad we got that on camera.
Curtis Hunter.
It's always different when you're being videoed, isn't it?
It's alright. Stop standing on me. Excited when I reply to you now.
Stop putting your foot. I'm leaning my foot.
I've actually even stopped replying. Sorry.
What we told you at first affirmative is that the reason we want to cut funding for arts degrees is they do not give any external benefits to society because they don't give actual skills which can productively contribute to society, and it's the reason why we fund them is because there's like a return on investment, if you will. All we've had in response is that arts promotes some different kind of thinking, and it also helps to know how Indigenous communities work. What I'm going to be talking to you today is two things. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about, is there some like invisible value of arts degrees, which is what Hana brought up, and we're going to show you why that there's not in the same way when you compare it to degrees in other areas. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the nature of government funding and why we've told you the hard and fast benefits that non-arts degrees have, why the government funds that, and why that's the reason why we don't fund degrees in arts. So firstly, on this value, and what we told you is that art degrees is where you learn how to write like essays on ideas and themes, and you get to talk about like political philosophy and like non-political philosophy, and all sorts of studies like that. What you learn in medicine is how to become a doctor. What you learn in economics is like actual like monetary things of how the economy works, so you can do things like that. And what you learn in law is like how to like work out law for firms and stuff. Those are productive skills which help society. Arts don't have that. Being able to write an essay on like the themes in some novel that no one's heard about does not add to society in the same way those others do. Now, you can't go to, the opposition gets up here and says, oh, arts promotes some different kind of thinking, which is very important, and somehow that value isn't recognised by the market, but it is there, you can't just see it. There's two problems with this. First, the assumption that it makes is that that kind of thinking you have to have an arts degree to have, and we say that's ridiculous. The second thing it assumes, that even if that first assumption was true, is it requires a university degree to have that kind of thinking. We say that that assumption also falls as well. So firstly, does arts degrees need some kind of like diversified, innovative kind of thinking? We say no, because we say even if you have a look at the most like rational, logical, 1 + 1 = 2 kind of study out there, which is science, is the example we brought in at. There's constant innovation, there's constant clash of ideas, and there's constant debate and interpretation of evidence and how that affects people. We think that in those other areas, those kind of critical thinking skills are just as important, and those kind of critical thinking skills are just as available to people that study those degrees. But secondly, even if the last 30 seconds of my speech was not true, true. We say that you do not need a university degree to have that knowledge anyway. Alec told you at first affirmative that there'd be no effect at all on like the number of like literature works or the number of like musicians, because that's not what it takes. You know, arts degrees don't provide that. Sitting in a lecture and being taught like themes and ideas of things doesn't actually alter like the way that people can go out there for themselves and find like ideas, you know, those ideas and critical thinking skills. Why are other degrees different? Because you have to go to university to learn the skills to become a doctor. You have to go to university to know the skills of becoming a lawyer or an economist. But like, there's no link at all between having a university degree and being able to understand literature or being able to like interpret ways of like philosophy and whatnot. Those kind of skills are not don't require a university degree, and for that reason we say that arts doesn't have any intrinsic value in that regard. And on the last point about Indigenous studies, I'd say, well, you don't need university degrees. Not going to help you at all. If you want to go learn about Indigenous people, go into those Indigenous communities yourself. There's no like skill that you learn in university that does that. Secondly, is the nature of government funding, and this is what we brought up at first affirmative, hasn't really been responded to. And what we say is that to take it on like a finance perspective, if you will, the reason the government funds tertiary education in say like law and medicine and commerce is it says, well, if we fund these people to go and get educated in this area, we know that in the long term the state is going to get those benefits back. There's going to be a return on that investment, not only in like tax dollars, but also the fact that like general economic well-being, those people go out and productively like increase innovate because they have those skills that they're able to do that. That's why the state funds them. In arts, because we've shown you that that it doesn't fall under that category. There's no actually economic return to the state, not only financially from like a getting the tax dollars back perspective, but also like an economic well-being of the nation. We say that it doesn't make sense in that ground as well to fund those arts degrees from an economic perspective. So 6 minutes lectures, is it? Yes.
Yep, sorry.
So for those two reasons that we say that arts degrees have no intrinsic value, they're just worthless to use a strong word, and that it's economically just irrational for the government to fund these things we're proud to propose.
I thought that last
Sorry,
particular worthless had a bit of passion behind it. Worthless!
It was actually.
Yeah, sorry.
Man.
It seems
Time
It just
flies
flew.
when you're
Oh, really? What can you speak? It was just going along.
You could take it as a
Had a bit of a swoon, did you, Alec?
You're obviously having fun.
It's making my heart flutter.
Kurt talking about the economy, you go, whoa.
When you said finance.
Go on top of that.
This is going to be the best montage ever.
Just can't think of
I'm really looking forward to it.
I can think of a few.
I'm
But
really looking forward to the montage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we all get a sneak preview, everyone who came? Like,
I'll probably post it on YouTube.
Okay.
Or Facebook.
debating montage.
Oh,
Can we have, are you just going to do the pictures or actually like...
No,
different
parts of
parts.
stage.
Oh,
Some of them were quite
you know the
good.
thing they did at Drum, where they did the up and down kind of thing? It was like...
it's not gonna be like that.
Can you do one of those of you just going like this?
Well, that's what I thought. I thought I could get like a
Because your hands do that a
sort of
lot.
a pop song where I'm just making the beat when I go like that. It's like,
DJ.
I'll use that.
Do that in your letters reply.
If you rap it, you will win.
Yeah. Just saying.
I should start now.
Come on, Paul.
Despite what Kurt Purdon wanted to tell us what government is supposed to fund, the generally accepted rule, right, is that governments fund things that would not otherwise be provided in a market. The funny thing about the negative case today is it's like the affirmative case. It's completely the opposite, they're right. They're like, the market provides for all these things like engineer and scientists, so we need to give them extra government funding for some reason, whereas the arts do not. We say that their case concedes the whole reason why the government needs to fund something in the first place. But in addition, right, there's a massive contradiction in their logic. Because on the one hand, they're like, arts will still exist, you can teach them to yourself. But then on the other hand, they're like, if we remove government funding, there'll be more people going into science and engineering or whatever, alright? They can see that there'll be less people taking arts degrees. So they can't say that it will be self-taught. But in addition, this idea that it'll be self-taught is ridiculous, right? Because in the same way you could read everything you needed to know for a 100 levels poll paper, you could also read the periodic table or whatever for everything you need to know for a science paper. But the point is, right, you're much more likely to do that when you're in a university, right? And so they can see that when you learn something in a university, you're much more likely to do it. And therefore it's not good enough for them to say everything will just be the same. Okay, I've got two questions. I'm firstly going to ask, is art a social good that the government should fund? And then secondly, I'll ask, will there be enough art without government funding? So starting with this idea of, is art a social good? We gave you three particular reasons as to why we thought there was a value in art. Yes, it's not necessarily immediately identified by the market, but we say there are lots of goods which there isn't a quantifiable return in terms of money. We told you firstly that the thought processes in an arts degree are remarkably different from that of science or commerce, because we say in science and commerce, where you're really learning whether something is right or wrong, an arts degree has the ability to teach you the thought processes on subjective points like politics and religion. We think that means that people have the ability to be able to research things and debate things and participate in discourse. And we say that thought process is very important and just won't exist through simply reading the crap in the newspaper or the listener. We think that university degrees necessarily teach at a much more deeper level because they've got much more time to communicate to someone who is more receptive than someone who is going to be watching television 1 news. The second thing we told you is that it improves tolerance in society. We pointed to you the example of Indigenous people. Their response was like, go and visit an Indigenous community. Okay, that's silly, alright? That's just like totally implausible, and it's not going to happen because of like natural in-group and out-group tendencies. And we say consequently the next best thing is to learn about them in a classroom from someone who might be Indigenous or not. Why is that? Because when you tend to understand how a culture operates, that means you're much more likely to be accepting of them. That's why over the recent history in New Zealand, we have become more tolerant to Maori rights and given them more things and recognised things like the Treaty of Waitangi, because people have gradually accepted the need for them through the fact that Maori is compulsory in our education system in some parts of it. The third reason we tell you that arts have a particular social good is because they act as an accountability check on the state itself. Because when you learn about politics and you learn about subjective thought and all these sort of like current issues, the citizens then have the ability to say to things they say in the media, to things they see in advertisements, to things that the government do, that's wrong. And we think that's really good for discourse and really good for ensuring transparency and accountability in government. So we say, and let's just like deal with this idea that all these things will exist without the state itself like demands these skills when they employ people like policy analysts, right? Like the private sector doesn't employ many policy analysts. So we say that the state does get a return itself from that. But moreover, we don't think like this idea that all these skills will exist in people just inherently is nonsense, right? Their case concedes that, right? If people if people could just go and like read about science, then and people could just go read about art, and there was no university at all, by their logic, everyone should still have those skills. But we say the whole point of a university is that it necessarily has the resources to communicate with that person more effectively, right? People who study politics generally know more about politics than the average person on the street, in the same way that someone who studies science generally knows more than the average science. So we say it's necessary that it's in a university and you don't learn about it from One News or what's that crappy thing, the Woman's Weekly. So now I'm going to move on to the second question about will there be enough art without government funding? And we say, one, they already concede that there won't be when they say we want all these people like to transition across from arts into science. We think that's a little like implausible as well, because we think that the people who are prone to take arts have like a different mode of thinking, as I've already explained, to the people who are prone to take science and maths, right? So we think that's a little wishful thinking, but in addition we say that they just, more importantly, they can see the point that there'll be less people learning all these important skills. And secondly, we tell you there'll be less art, because we tell you that the free market and the private sector and the free market doesn't necessarily pay people for these jobs. We say the state sometimes uses themselves, and sometimes the skills you learn don't directly translate into jobs. They translate into other productive things which happen in society, which I've already outlined in my speech. So firstly, because we think that art is really valuable, and secondly, because even they think that it won't exist, we win.
Shall we just
No, Alec looks pretty much like he's. We also
Maybe
suppose
you can do the like result at drinks.
Paul,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
take you seriously when you say free market anymore. I just hear free market arts, just like
Oh, that's not very nice.
We can give the result. Like I don't.
Yeah,
We can
just do
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah.
Does anyone know what time that drinks store?
We closed.
that was close.
New World is pretty much the only option now.
New order 9 day. 9 day has a very reasonable 20 cans for $25.
Is that the night and day on George Street?
That's a fair one. Okay, I suppose not.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
I've got a car, so.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you guys
Kind of
New
negates the
Go to New
whole
York.
distance thing.
Definitely go New World if you got a car. So much cheaper.
There's no liquor shop open, so
The New World's not open, though, it shuts at 8.
No, it's just at 10.
not
no,
one.
Centre City is open till 10.
Alright.
Yeah, that one just early.
Ross on New World closes at 8 as well. Just thought I'd let you know.
Roslyn's closes at 9.
It
though.
does.
In case you think it wasn't New
I mean
York.
Alec.
Yeah, don't go to
No, but Fresh Choice, it's past 9 as well.
Alec,
Yeah.
speak. No, sorry, Hana.
Usually
I
the negative
refuse.
leaders.
I didn't even catch
Fail.
that. Yeah, well, no.
As is customary at this point of the debate.
2 to 3.
I love it just to mix things up a bit. It's like, no, it's not. When was the last time someone mixed something up with reversing the people? Like,
Yeah, actually.
Just
We-
to make things up a bit,
part,
there's
we
a
don't
5
have
from
to
the F.
yeah, exactly. We should do that. We're going to actually mix some stuff up again. Which is we're going to invite someone new.
So that we arbitrarily pull
Good.
the
Give them a reply to the F.
like, you are
Anyway.
gone.
Bye.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sort of summarise 3 the really important points that needed to be answered in this debate. So, first of all, is the key question of is there any benefit in arts degrees? And from the affirmative team, we've heard that there's not benefit. That basically, the government doesn't get an economic return on an arts degree. It doesn't generate jobs. It doesn't generate any sort of worthwhile thinking. It's just basically sort of a waste of time, and essentially people could just read a book and learn exactly the same thing. But whereas from the negative side of the house today, we've consistently told you where the benefit lies in arts degrees, and while it may not be in doctors or engineers, it is in, first of all, a different but just as academic and honed school of thought, a school of thought that critically analyses like politics and media and philosophy and cultures and engages with all those things in a way that scientists never do. We say that we've also shown you how there's massive benefits in terms of like cross-cultural acceptance and understanding and research work being done there. But we've also told you how there's a really solid benefit in terms of the jobs that arts degrees actually put out. We say that the public sector in particular, like when the government wants to do things like make sure that citizens of different races aren't being marginalised within the country, or want to see more effective ways that they can set up benefit programs or things. It's people who have been critically taught to analyse population trends or cultural things that are the people they need to turn to. So we see that the sort of arts degrees that we're currently offering and are currently being used actually produce massive benefits. So the next question then is, will there be less of this if we're not funding it at university? And both teams have kind of said, well, yes. And then the affirmative team have again tried to be like, well, like there'll be a wee bit less, but it'll be fine because everyone will just read it sort of in a book, and we'll have just as many sort of well-thinking people there. But we've told you consistently, again, ladies and gentlemen, that there'll be less quality in those, just by the very nature of the fact that when you're sitting, well, first of all, there's quantity, like far less people are going to go and read a whole bunch of books as opposed to like sit for a degree for a bit and get some really good teaching, but also just in terms of the quality of information. We say that the concentration of teaching and of your access to diversity of thought, as well as your access to like academic scrutiny and you know, like big idea generations, is just far greater at university, that there is a massive importance on being able to do these sort of things at university as opposed to just reading a book. So we say that there's a really big benefit. Without the funding, we will have far less of that benefit. So the final question is then, should the government be funding arts degrees? And unlike the affirmative team today, we think that the government should be funding things where the benefit won't accrue without their funding. Like the affirmative team, want to put all their money on stuff that they think they're going to have anyway. Because like the market really needs science and we get lots of jobs. It's really easy to see the benefit. So the government should be paying for it. Well, we actually say no, ladies and gentlemen, when we can show you that there is a hard and fast benefit in arts degrees and that university education is a critical part of achieving the maximum part of that benefit, then the government should absolutely be putting funding towards that. Like, you get a good thing, without the funding it won't exist. We should put the funding there. And so, as I believe that's like 3.5 minutes out of my 3 that I was meant to have,
Yeah, I've got
our
3
case
points.
will stand. Who's timekeeping?
Yeah, I'm failing.
Okay.
What did the BA say to the BSc?
Do you want a prize with that?
Yeah. I thought it was the other way around, but it's funny because I work at Matrix and I'm doing a BSc. And now whenever I feel like making a laugh, I feel like I'm making a laugh. Like a
Otherwise, we're probably like he's having a bit of a spasm, isn't it?
energy stuff.
Unnatural.
So his little happen. It's like.
We say we'll abolish the funding of arts degrees. We say that they provide us with diversity. Remix! Ladies and gentlemen, I've got 3 points that I'm going to talk to you about in today's debate. I don't actually have 3 points that I'm going to talk to you about in today's debate. I'm just going to talk to you essentially about why the value that arts degrees, what value science and non-arts degrees give us, and why the market, while it rewards them adequately, doesn't incentivise them adequately, and why we require that funding. Then I'm going to talk to you about the value of arts degrees and why it's going to be provided under the system anyway. First of all, very briefly, Paul's tried to get up here and say, because we say that the market rewards these certain types of study, that people are already going to do as much as the market provides them for already. Ladies and gentlemen, the market rewards things like innovation and entrepreneurship really, really well, but that doesn't necessarily incentivise them, because innovation and entrepreneurship require a certain level of individual thinking and so on. We say that actually therefore needs the government, a certain amount of government funding to be able to promote people to go into things like innovation, things like creating certain scientific breakthroughs that the market will reward, but it won't necessarily be inherently obvious when people take those degrees and so on. We say that therefore you're still going to need that funding. We secondly say that actually the onus isn't on us to prove why science degrees need funding, it's on us to prove why we can abolish arts funding, and because we say that that doesn't provide all of those values that those other things do. Okay, so what values have they given us that art provides us? They say it provides us certain abilities to analyse things. We say that actually you can actually analyse population trends, you can do things like that perfectly fine with any other form of degree that's not an arts degree as well if you want to. We say that you can go in and look at, I don't know, like the health trends from people. If you've done a health sciences degree, that works really, really fine. We think that's a fine thing. We think that you can actually learn a lot more about a culture by going and living with them rather than doing a degree. We think that that's going to be much better. The other thing they've said it provides is critical analysis. We say that firstly, they conceded throughout this entire debate the creation of arts that provide that critical analysis in the first place, whether they be novels, whether they be poetry, which is really good at it, and any kind of music that directly contradicts and conflicts with culture is already going to exist anyway. But we secondly say that people can teach it to themselves perfectly fine. And thirdly, which is because when you compare it with, say, something like science, which requires a laboratory for you to be able to research and which requires certain funding, certain startup points, or economics, which requires consistent practice, compared to an arts degree, which requires you to read and think about it, that is all. And we say that even if that existed, the benefits that they told us about arts degrees are still really, really small when you think about it on a contextual level. The ability for somebody to go and analyse population trends or learn about a culture, you need very few people to be able to do that. Those people can be the ones that like win awesome scholarships for being great history students at school. We don't need to fund thousands and thousands of students to do arts degrees to require that. We can rely upon the few people that will still be doing arts degrees without that funding to bring that small value that will exist from arts degrees. It does not exist to the same degree that science does and the commerce do, and the ability that they generate entrepreneurship and innovation and business that make great contributions to society. We say on this side of the house that it's absolutely crucial, therefore, that we abolish the funding of arts degrees no matter what they say about diversity. Cheeky cheeky, I'm out, y'all.
It's gonna be Dawson motto.
That's definitely.
That's in the motto.